The number one leadership challenge right now facing our teams is that we have got to learn how to drive people intensely and then rest and recover. No one's working 9 to 5 anymore, but you cannot be constantly online, on demand, and expect that your top talent's going to stay or that you're not going to burn them out.
This is the Snarketing Podcast. For marketers, by marketers. Talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie Vespa and Matt Wurst.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Snarketing Podcast. I'm Matt Wurst, and this one feels a little different because if you've been listening for a while, or even just to one episode, you know that this is usually where Valerie jumps in. She sharpens the edges, she keeps me honest, she laughs at my bad jokes, and she occasionally recuses me from myself. But Valerie is away for this episode, maybe the next one or two, tending to some personal matters. I'm going to respect her privacy because that's what you do for people that you care about. So just know that she's exactly where she needs to be right now with her family, handling things far more important than podcast banter. I'll say this. It feels strange doing this without her. A little lonely, if I'm honest. Valerie is one of the great human beings that I've gotten to know in this industry, in my life, and I don't say that lightly. I am pretty selective about who gets upgraded from professional contact to actual friend to podcast co-host. There's only been one. It's a small circle, and she's it. Valerie is thoughtful, she's principled, she is fiercely smart, and she has this rare combination of empathy and edge that makes both the podcast and my life better. So, Val, if and when you ever listen to this episode, just know that we all love you. I am grateful for you. I'm sending you all my best while you take care of what matters most. Now, for today's episode, this is a good one. I sat down with an author, an operator, what I'm calling a reformed marketer. Her name is Mita, Mallick. And I call her a reformed marketer with all respect because this conversation isn't about hacks or growth tricks or performance dashboards, which are things that we all get sometimes lost in or think is overly important. But this conversation is about what happens when you've spent years inside the marketing machine and you start questioning the machine itself. We talk about culture, we talk about representation, we talk about leadership with a little snark, and we talked about the difference between saying the right things and actually building the right things the right way. And we talked about what it means to show up with courage when the easy move is silence.
Today on the Snarketing Podcast, Matt sits down with Mita Mallick, corporate changemaker, marketing leader, and acclaimed author of not one, but two great books, Reimagine Inclusion and The Devil Emails at Midnight. With a career spanning global brands and a bold voice challenging performative culture, Mita unpacks what it really takes to build workplaces rooted in accountability, representation, and real impact. Miss you, Val, and take it away, Matt.
Mita, hi, and welcome to our podcast. I'm so grateful that you've made some time here in the doldrums of winter to warm up our audience a little bit and have a fun conversation. Are you ready to jump in?
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Of course.
Yes.
No, we've been looking forward to this. We've been connected digitally for a while, but now we're going to dig even deeper and we'll see how it goes. If you regret it, just tell me not to publish it.
We'll delete it. We won't publish it.
We'll pretend like it never happened. That's never happened. So if it does, clearly I will take it personally, but it'll show just how valuable Valerie is to this relationship. And I'm sorry she's not here and you're missing her, but we carry on. So want to jump in with you because your career is really fascinating to me. You worked at J&J and Pfizer and Unilever, and you've led this inclusive marketing story for major brands, but now you're a best-selling author who writes about bad bosses, which we've all had. You talk about DE&I. So let me ask you just as the first question, when someone asks you, what do you do? What do you actually
That's great.
say?
That's like what my kids ask me because they don't understand what I do.
And I have probably the same level of
Yeah,
intelligence and
no,
emotional
no.
maturity.
I help people do better work at work. I make workplaces better. That's what I'm doing right now. That's what I simply like to tell my kids.
And you were doing that from the inside.
Yes,
Now
yeah.
you're doing it from the
Yes,
outside.
absolutely.
Okay. So I mentioned and name dropped some of those big companies. They're good logos that anyone would love to have on their resume or on their client roster. But after 15 or so, if I count right, years at these massive health and beauty and lifestyle brands, I'm curious as the insider what those companies got right about brand building that emerging companies or companies that may not have even been established yet are missing because they've gotten it right.
I'll add to the resume. I did 15 plus years, as you said, in very large public companies. And then I went into the tech world and to startup tech for about 4+ years. So that was my first time at a privately held company. And lots of differences. I mean, here's the thing. I wouldn't be a best-selling author. I wouldn't be the powerful storyteller I am without those experiences. Because one of the things, and this is when I was growing up and left business school, I wanted to go to some of these big companies because that's where you learn the fundamentals of marketing, right? And a lot of it was a slog. There were bad bosses, there were great bosses, there were bad colleagues, etc. But I learned from some of the greatest people who were doing marketing at the time. And I go back to a lot of those principles. Now, this is likely different in some ways. There wasn't as much risk taking. I think the media landscape was different then. I think when I'm looking at what people are doing in tech, when you're more smaller, when you're more nimble, you don't need 35 cooks in the kitchen and approval from London and this place and that place. You can really quickly move. You know, in tech, you really like if you're at a startup, it's really the founder in a lot of cases who's making the decision. So if I can convince you, Matt, to say yes to the idea, great. If I can't convince you, I'm stuck. Whereas in a large company, there's a lot of people making the decisions. It's not just.
Well, now though, also I think there's like this instant accountability to the masses that you have to almost get it right from second one, minute one, day one. Otherwise, the bigger the company, the higher the stakes, the higher the visibility. Do you sort of appreciate and look back on the time in those earlier years where you now like had a little bit of luxury of being able to figure things out a little bit more slowly?
I would agree with that. A friend said to me not too long ago, we want things that are microwavable in 30 seconds or less. So really interesting, like really instant gratification and you move on. But there is sort of a nostalgia. I mean, I was rewatching Mad Men episodes. If anyone ever has watched Mad Men, right? It's like, wow, it's like things that took like, it took like a year or 2 years to work on a campaign. That doesn't happen anymore. You don't have that luxury. But
did you grow up wanting to like be in that space though? Where I mean, Mad Men obviously predates all of us, but the jingles, the commercials, right? That's like
the weird kid who, I mean, I was the weird kid for a lot of reasons where I grew up. I was the, funny looking, dark skinned Indian girl with a long, funny looking braid whose parents spoke funny English until it wasn't funny anymore, right? I was like very sort of the odd one out in my community where I grew up outside of Boston. And I was immersed in movies and books and TV and magazines. And I was the kid who loved watching commercials more than the shows. And I loved being in the grocery aisle with my mom. Like, who gets their face on a cereal box and why? Like, I was obsessed with all these things. And so that, and then you couple the fact that I was bullied a lot as a kid. I was shy and introverted. I spent a lot of time alone. So I wrote a lot. And so I always thought that somehow writing would show up in my life. And in my 20s, I actually had written 3 novels. I had an agent. I didn't get published. She dropped me really meanly over email, like in all caps, being like, stop calling my office. I'm no longer representing you. I was like, no.
by the way, I hope you sent copies of your books to her.
Yeah.
But just like the kindest note of all
Actually, I was
time.
inspired by Adam Sandler. There's like a viral video about a professor who said to him that he would never act and that he should leave the acting program. And you all can look up that viral clip, but I was inspired by that clip that a friend sent me. And I did send this person my latest book, The Devil Emails at Midnight. And I said, you represented me years ago. And I just wanted you to know, even though I started my roots in fiction, I'm in business now, and how some of the fiction work we did together inspired me.
You have a level of maturity that I probably would not have had, because my note might have said something a little different, but good for you. I would also be remiss if I didn't channel my Valerie at this point, because you mentioned growing up in Boston, where she's from. She would have then gone on a 15-minute diatribe about neighborhoods and different things. So I will just clap for you and say, good work. But that background, that environment must have been very interesting. And we're probably in the same generation, although I'm probably a little bit older. But I have to imagine that as someone who grew up looking at, watching, paying attention to marketing, that was a different time too, where you might not have seen yourself like represented in those ads.
My Black girlfriends were joke. You were reading Essence? I'm like, what was I going to read? Yeah, I was reading Essence. Yeah, I was really interested. I mean, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I was like, oh my God, who is this family, right? Like I had never seen anyone who I thought was remotely looked like me on billboards, on screens, on all these things. And so I always ask my question. I always thought about like who holds the power of the pen and why? Like who gets to make these decisions, right? And so then when I go back to being dumped by my agent in my 20s, what am I going to do with my life? I ended up looking at business schools, because I was like, I'm this connection between writing and marketing I'm really interested in. And so I ended up going to Duke for business school. But that was really sort of the moment where I thought, what am I going to do with my life? And then I ended up in a long career as a marketing executive and then HR executive.
So was that the moment? I don't know if it was when your agent dropped you or earlier, when you realized, like, I do have to fight for this?
Yeah, I mean, I also was like, I could get a master's in creative writing. Being a writing and trying to make a living is tough, right? And so I was like, what can I do? Like, what career would be interesting to me? And then I started looking at these companies like Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Avon, Unilever. And at the time, Procter & Gamble, a lot of these big CPG companies, beauty companies, MBAs were a feeder, right? If you could get an MBA, they had programs. Yeah. And so that's what I had studied, because I had not been the person who left undergrad and had done like a marketing analyst role. So how do you attract the attention of one of these big CPG companies? You need to have the credentials to get in. And so for me, that was the MBA.
That's just so ironic that the MBA basically teaches you how to write pitch decks, and that you wrote best-selling books. That's evolution, or maybe revolution.
Things are different now, right? But yeah, I didn't. Back to your point, I didn't grow up in an Instagram era. I didn't see myself reflected in products and services. And so, yeah, there are a lot of things I keep. We joke the world's on fire and frozen at the same time. There are a lot of things that are crappy happening in the world right now. But my kids are also, I know, growing up in a different era than I did. They see themselves much more reflected in the world than I did.
I've read your work now, and you've made the case that inclusion isn't charity, which it shouldn't be. It's now good business, right? I have female athlete friends who have made this case for 15, 20 years, and it's finally coming to fruition. I guess for CMOs now who are being forced to either go right path or left path, and some still see DE&I as like a nice to have. Is there this like blunt data-backed argument that we can make?
I mean, I would start with inclusion's a driver of the business. One stat I read recently, Procter & Gamble says there's, several $1 trillion of spending power with the multicultural consumer, close to 7 or 8. That doesn't include the LGBTQ community, veterans, individuals with disabilities, Muslim community, Jewish community. Think about all those intersections. And you think to yourself, well, what is a marketer's job? I always think it's like, I'm going to surprise or delight you with something you didn't expect, or that it enhances the quality of your life, because I've studied you so well that I know that you would love this thing. And so why wouldn't you help someone and serve them in that way? So if you think about that, think about all the dollars that you're leaving on the table. And then you start to think about, okay, so then let's think about inclusion's a driver of the business. Do you have those ideas represented internally? Right now, we're sitting in the US. The census data will tell us over 40% of individuals identify as non-white. And then you think about all those communities. Do you have those individuals sitting around the table that can help you generate those ideas? And if you don't, because you're smaller or because you haven't been able to recruit or all the things that I hear, well, then do you have partners, right? Do you have agencies? Are you working with nonprofits? Are you thinking about how can I have a breakthrough differentiated idea where I can serve this community?
That's interesting. And from even just like a moment in time perspective, because this is really the focus of your first book, right? Reimagine Inclusion, which, the first time I saw the title, I was like, well, who is actually imagining it in the first place to now reimagine it? Because I think you're probably ahead of the game. Maybe some people were, but I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. But you also
lost the plot with inclusion, which is why when you ask that question, that's what it's about. I mean, I think the word is weaponized, right? And so that's the reimagine part. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, no, I think that's right. Like I think the structure of the book is like debunking 13 myths, which Taylor Swift would love. I don't know if 13 for a specific reason.
That's my lucky number. Everything's 13 that I write.
There you go. So literally the half birthday of Taylor Swift. I know that, but I have a 12-year-old daughter. So now, as you look back, that book is a couple of years old. Is there a persistent myth about this that still drives you crazy as you think about it?
There's one there's one myth that I think the audience will think about as they listen to it. Our ad wasn't racist. It was simply a mistake. So I think this whole idea that it goes back to whether it's in marketing or in business overall, people not wanting to take accountability, people not wanting to, companies who are made up of individuals, to just say, I'm sorry, apologize, own the apology, and then try to rebuild trust. There's this still like sweeping under there. It was a mistake. It was misunderstood, or I'm going to delete it, delete it before anyone, too many people see it and pretend it didn't happen. I think that is something that I wish more people would think about. Well, what if I just owned it and said, yes, it happened? And you actually build much more respect for it. I include Sephora as a business case. I mean, Sephora stopped taking my money. I spent too much money at Sephora, but they talk about, I studied Sephora, and it was, 2017, around then, when they had an in-store racist incident they were accused of by somebody who was of celebrity status. And I talk about that in the book. And what they've done to rebuild trust over the years with their consumer is pretty astounding. And so I think more about when an instance like that happens, are you going to take accountability and actually use it as a spark to reignite your business?
Well, it probably depends if it was intentional or not intentional, right? I don't know that anyone will ever admit to intention. They'll always find a way to, but it's the difference between diversity of thought versus diversity of representation, which I know you've talked about. And sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge. It's ignorance, right? But even ignorance is...
I love that you bring that up, because I think sometimes intention versus being intentional versus unintentional. Here's what I find mostly happens is that it doesn't matter. The consumer doesn't care. It doesn't matter. And what I will say is, when you're in that room or on that Zoom and you're reviewing a piece of content, we've all been there, and listen to the whispers are the loudest. There's somebody junior in the room who says, this makes me uncomfortable. This is sexist. This is rape, or something. They might not have that language. And then somebody else who's more senior may trump them and say, I think you're making a big deal about it. It's fine. That sometimes I've been in those rooms where that happens. So either the person making the decision, when you talk about intention, they might not actually see it because it's not their lived experience. Like, they actually don't see that there's an issue with the piece of content because they haven't experienced it. And so then that's when it's like, you're being overly sensitive. You're joking. Don't make a big deal out of it.
Well, yeah, there's creating a safe environment for those conversations to take place and then not dismissing it, which I guess becomes a negative feedback loop. The more someone smacks you down, the less comfortable you're going to feel. Okay, so let's get into the newer book. The newer book, which is already a couple months old. We didn't get to break the scoop like we have with some other authors.
We'll do that. Yes, there we
go. All right. Well, we'll talk about that when we're ready, whether this podcast or another one. But the newer book, The Devil Emails at Midnight, which ironically, I actually sent an email or Slack message around midnight last night. So now I feel like the asshole. But who hurt you, right? Like, name names.
I
No,
didn't name
seriously.
names.
It,
I changed all the details.
I know. I was asking, hoping that you might stir
If
some
you come and talk to
controversy.
my
But
husband, he might give you some names.
why write about bad bosses now? It's not like they're new.
I wanted a new take, which was how many people actually will say, it was the opening lines of my book, I've been a bad boss and chances are so have you. Listen, I've been the person who will talk about, oh, my boss did this, this, and this to me, and they suck, and we've all done that. Or I've been the person who has contributed to the literature and the content in our world that is like, how do you survive the toxic boss? How do you spot a toxic boss? How do you manage up to a toxic boss? Like, but like, what if we are the problem? What if we have, as you talk about, intentionally or unintentionally, habits and things that we're doing that is capping the potential of our teams? Wouldn't we want to think about that? And of course, in the book, I have 13 archetypes, including myself. They're wide ranging. And not everybody is going to be to the level of some of these bad bosses that I described. But what's interesting, Matt, is I'm talking to people. I was talking to someone yesterday. They're like, oh, I was reading your book and I was kind of cringing because I saw myself in some of the chapters. And that's the point.
And I read the book, right? So you said the bad bosses aren't born, they're
Yes.
made, I
Yep.
think was kind of the gist, right? What are they made by? Pressure? Like ego, lack of training,
Yeah,
all the above?
Number one, pressure. You just nailed it on the head. We're sitting in the US right now, tariffs, taxes, policies. What's happening? As a business leader, you have not a lot of control on a lot of things coming out of the administration that are impacting your business. And so you can be absorbing that pressure and exhibiting bad boss behavior. Number two, you just talked about training. You work for me, it's your first time in a leadership role, and I am a terrible boss. I'm a horrible boss, and you don't know any better, and you start absorbing these behaviors. And then number three is, we were in the green room earlier talking about all these things happening in our lives, a lot of things happening. And when you have a personal earthquake, something cataclysmic happen, you cannot just shove grief into the kitchen drawer and show up at work and think everything's going to be fine. And oftentimes that's when also bad boss behavior will occur. And I will tell you, the one thing that I'm seeing right now in the marketplace, which is troubling, is that because so many of us feel a loss of control over what's happening in the greater world, we're looking for control. It reminds me of the pandemic days. And so the easiest way to get control is to show up at work and control your team and start to micromanage, right? Can I be in that meeting? Can I join that client call? I'm just following up again on the proposal. I know I said it was due next week, but just wanted to, like, all the ways in which we just want that dopamine hit to feel like we have some sort of control.
And you talked about the number 13 again, right? You wrote about 13 bad bosses. Hopefully they weren't all yours. Otherwise, that price says more about you than them. But even when you admit that you are the bad boss, whether looking at them or looking at you, what do you think is the most typical behavior that can be corrected?
Typical behavior that can be corrected. And then I want to go back to your comment about 13 bosses. So don't.
Okay.
I think one of the things we talked about, training and leadership and development, I think I remember the first time I was promoted, it was like, oh, Mita, you're promoted. You get a title. You get an office now with a door. And now you have like 10 people that report into you. And I'm like, huh? Is there like a manual? I never got any training the first time I was in charge of other people's careers, which is not a right, it's a privilege. And our corporate structures are set up such that you think someone's a good individual contributor, and all of a sudden you think they can go from being an individual contributor to teaching other people and coaching and leading, which is not true. And so what I find fascinating about tech and what they're doing well in like an engineering function, they have two tracks. They'll have a track which is individual contributor and someone who's a manager. And as an individual contributor, I can still get paid more. I can still get recognized. I can still feel like I have a voice and that my ideas matter. I don't have to manage anyone. And I know you know this. Our career goes in seasons, right? Sometimes we'll be an IC, sometimes we'll manage people, but too often we force people. It's the way we have structured companies. We force people to take promotions when they're not interested, trained, or ready.
Yeah, I mean, I got my start in more of a journalism background, and some of the career models don't mirror the rest of corporate world in that you could be the best writer, but you may never want to be the editor or the newsroom manager. And you know what? that's like good for you. Different skill sets, different motivations, different incentive structures. Uh, but I think that early in your career, you're not, even as an employee, taught what to
Yes.
value, right? And I think that becomes part of both the training and the sort of bad
Yes. Yeah.
growth
Yeah.
trajectory that's
Yeah.
created. Um, yeah, I don't know if, again, the midnight email specifically, whether it's the time of day or sometimes it's just like power
Yes.
signaling, but is there something that employees should call out when they see it? Like, can they do that without
Well,
getting in trouble?
you teach people how to treat you. And so if you are constantly making yourself available like an Uber app on demand 24/7, and I know we're wanting to stay relevant, add value,
Mm.
make sure our boss sees us, recognizes all of us, especially in this market. But here's what I will tell you is it's more than about emailing at midnight. The number one leadership challenge right now facing our teams is that we have got to learn how to drive people intensely and then rest and recover. No one's working 9 to 5 anymore, but you cannot be constantly online on demand and expect that your top talent's going to stay or that you're not going to burn them out. And so let's use a live example here. If I'm the one emailing you at midnight and I'm your boss, and I email you and I actually say, "Oh, Matt, I'm sending this now because it's top of mind for me, but you don't have to respond till the morning, or let's just talk about it in the team meeting." Okay, there's an issue there. I should just wait for the team meeting. Why am I saying the no?
Yeah, or
Yes,
schedule it to be
right.
delivered
But
to
then
the
what
next
happens
morning,
is
right?
you
Yeah.
actually respond. We go back to you want to be relevant, you want to keep your job, you want to show value. And then guess what happens? We get into a back and forth at midnight.
You're reinforcing the
Right?
bad
Because then
behavior.
I said to you, don't respond. You responded because I understand you are more junior in this relationship, but then I responded back and I should have left it alone. Right. And so think about that. And I've been guilty of this. I've been the person who wants to dump something out of my inbox onto yours as fast as I can. Why don't I hold it? Why don't I write it down? Why don't I delay it, sending it? Why don't I wait for a one on one? Why don't I think about all the other ways I can communicate rather than just like dumping things out at midnight?
Well, there's a almost personal and professional irony that I'm literally about to experience.
We'll do some live coaching. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, maybe. So thank you. Again, I've in my career I've managed or led hundreds of people, and I don't say that like to brag. It's just, again, I've been the bad boss. I know it. Sometimes I'm personally offended when people tell me that they think I'm being a bad boss, but then I think back and understand and recognize how to improve upon it. But now, as someone who's building a company, I am a discipline and capability lead as well as a leader at a very small company that's growing very quickly. I have my first direct report starting next week, which I am a C-level, co-founder with that experience. This person is, we have two offices, one in India, one in New York. This person is reporting to me from India. The only way that I can communicate is to send, I mean, we'll have some overlapping time, but there will be lots of back and forth that happens in off hours. And as I'm reading the book, I'm thinking, I literally have to do all these things. So I want to train my employee to like not feel like she has to respond or fear me or any of
Love
these
that.
things. And like on day one, set those
Amazing.
ground
In your
rules.
communications framework,
Is
that's
that
it. Because you're in different time zones. So when are the overlapping times when you'll be able to actually get on Zoom, do live work together? What are the expectations on like how you're gonna when something's urgent, right? Because when you're sleeping, she's up. And when she's sleeping, you're so like, how do you think about those things? And does she now have this expectation that she has to work US hours? Or what is the right? And so I think those are really important conversations to happen now because the relationship is new and fresh. And you can do that. Having these conversations 6 months in is really tough when too much has transpired or 3 months in. So you setting the tone is amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, the good news is that she's around other people. Like, we have a
Right.
large office there, uh, but creating those structures that may not be the same for how
Sure.
others who literally sit next to her are operating is is kind of where the challenge exists, because she's going to ask a question to the person sitting next to her and not me, because she's going to need that immediate answer. So I think this is I don't know, I might be number 14 in the sequel, or maybe not, but I think as long
I don't
as
think you will be. You're
I'm
very
aware of
self-aware
this.
and you're starting off. These are the conversations, because we'll get it wrong more than we'll get it right. But you're starting to have these conversations and working on it.
Here's the flip side to this. You ready? I was just reading this morning about AI agents who are hiring their own human employees. I understood maybe 60% of what they were saying technically, and 0% of how it's going to work operationally. But in this, that's a very extreme example, at least for now. But in this hybrid AI driven, hyper measured workplace, are we going to produce either more bad bosses or more bad employees because performance pressure is just higher? It's like, if you don't perform, I got something else that can replace you.
I hope not. I hope actually, if you think about the things AI is bringing, which is automating work that maybe we should never have been doing in the work for in the first place, that you will then have more time to be creative and lean into being human and help each other and coach each other. Think about the number one complaint people: I don't have enough time. I don't have time to do this, do this. Okay, now you have time because you actually have AI doing all these things. And my recent stint as an HR executive, and I know feel this way about marketing too, but like in the HR world, there's so many things that can be automated that people are trying to figure out how to give someone a pay increase off cycle. You're like, how many heads does that take to put together? Where now you have hopefully processes that are streamlining and automating, and that you have time for people to really help solve those big problems, and also to coach people, right, and to train people and to teach people.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why, again, you said the word awareness. I think that's always the first step in understanding that there's an issue or that there's an opportunity, right? Let's put a positive spin on this. So before we kind of put a bow on this section of coaching, mentorship, however you want to position it, if there is someone who's listening right now that thinks, you know what, maybe the devil emailing at midnight, how do they self-correct or identify and self-correct? Because if you're a manager, you may not have the ability, or a leader, to go to a peer to help you.
Oh, I want you to ask your teams, but I want you to do it in the following way. So if you have an instinct that you have a feeling that you're doing something that's not landing well, that's self-awareness, and listen to that. So here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to do what a former boss used to do to me, which is like, Mita, tell me what you think I'm doing well. What do you think I should be working on? And you're like, is this a trap? Yes, it is. Because I channel Brene Brown, clear as kind. And I remember telling him what I thought, and he lost his goddamn mind. Self-defensive, that didn't happen, that's not true, right? And you're like, okay, why did you ask me? This is so weird. Like, why did you ask me? And then after that, guess what happened? Every time you'd ask me, I'd be like, 2 thumbs up, everything's great, right? And I wasn't going to tell him what I really thought. But imagine if bosses stopped asking that open-ended question: tell me what you think I should be doing better. Let's try this. I'm having coffee with Matt on Monday. He's on my team. And I say, Matt, looking forward to coffee. We're going to review this client proposal. I also wanted to let you know I've been thinking about my own areas of opportunity when it comes to my leadership style. The one thing I want to work on is being able to delegate faster to the team and provide more coaching and feedback on some of the proposals we're working on. I'd love to hear your coaching and feedback on this. So there's a few things I've done in this. I've put it in writing, so you have time to actually review it and think about it, so you're not on the spot.
By the way, send it at midnight.
Or schedule it.
Yeah.
Schedule
Think
it.
about
All right.
it.
And then you're going to actually be vulnerable, because it's not an open-ended question. Matt's going to get this note and say, oh, Mita's actually thinking about this. She's serious, because she's actually revealed something she wants to work on. And then third, I use the word coaching. It's not like give me feedback. I'm sort of like, hey, yeah, that's what we should be doing for each other. And the trick is, when I meet with you, a few things are going to happen. One, you're going to say, thanks for the invitation to give you some coaching. I agree that's what you should be working on. I'd love to help you with it. Or two, you might be like, that's not what you should be working on. You should work on keeping your temper in check, or something that I'm going to be like, what? That's not what I thought you were going to say. And I'm going to say, thanks for the feedback. I'm going to process and get back to you. I think too many people get defensive in the moment when someone's trying to point something out. But that's what I hope more of us can do for each other.
So slow it down, be thoughtful, but kind of demonstrate not to be overly performative, but demonstrate that you're actually
One
putting
thing,
thought into it.
exactly. Because you asked me at the beginning, it's like, I have an inclining. I think I'm being a bad boss. I think I'm doing something. So lean into that feeling and explore it and ask someone for help.
Because if you actually pulled out a list of 10 things you think they're doing wrong as soon as they ask you, clearly
Yeah.
you've thought about it, but you might not be sending the right message. Okay, that's good. So for listeners, hopefully you took those notes down. You'll process that, you'll think about it, and then you'll deliver that feedback. That perspective, though, because you've been in corporate roles as a managed employee, as a leader, then you move out to be operator, startup builder, tech, right? To really a prolific writer. I've seen stuff, right, that you've done in trade publications and other magazines and journals, and now these books. But how I first connected with you, as I said, is LinkedIn. Absolutely, you are a must follow. So I encourage people to check that out. But what's your philosophy there? Like,
yeah, great question. I think with anything, one of my most underrated superpowers is consistency. It really is. I mean, people even ask me, how did you get to be this best-selling author? How did you LinkedIn? How are you a top voice? You have over 200,000 followers. It's consistency. People are surprised to know that I don't have a virtual assistant. I'm not part of paid pods. I write my own content. I post. And if you do get a comment back from me, it's me or a message, and I own all my own typos. But I do that. I enjoy it. It sparks joy after years of having worked on brands like Dove and Ben and Jerry's and all these big names where there's like 25 people involved in social media. It's really fun and nice to be able to run it yourself and do what you want. Experiment, have fun with it, be real with your audience. But I'm also, it's my own brand, it's my own reputation, right? There is freedom in that. There's also challenges in that because I'm doing it myself, but it's very much aligned to my books and what I talk about. And that's what I think of. I also think of it as like a learning platform and a teaching platform. That's the way in which I approach it.
Do you write or create? I mean, there's a balance between vulnerability and professionalism, right? Like you advise CEOs and boards and you want them to take you seriously. So do you write differently now compared to when you might have been like inside a corporation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a LinkedIn learning instructor, and one of the first courses I did for them was how to balance being a full-time creator with the full-time job. Like, how do you do that? And I do think, like, even when I write, I'm never tagging companies, shaming, naming, blaming people, right? Like, I want people to learn from these experiences. And so thinking about how I disguise things or how I position things. I could have a post just be a complaint, or I could have a post be a story and there's a lesson here. Like, this is, every time I thought was getting promoted, why didn't it happen? Here's what I should have done differently. Like, that's what I want people to think about, right? Because anything else is really from my journal, and I do journal a lot. Like, it's a diary entry, right? If it's therapy and I want to write those things out, but then it's like, okay, no, I want people to learn something that I wish I had learned. And that's how I think about it. But I always say to people, if you're ever about to write something about your company or your industry that is not in a positive light, that's probably the time when you need to think about what you want to do next before you post that in social media, right? That's not the time when you work there still.
Understanding what the outcome of any action is requires being thoughtful, being measured, not being spontaneous. But there's also something to be said, and look, most people on social media or even creators of content, writers, leaders, most people are consumers first and may never create or contribute. That balance, whatever, 99.1, 98.2. But I think whether it's becoming a contributor, becoming a creator, becoming a leader, putting yourself out there requires some degree of, maybe the word is courage. I don't know. I haven't thought.
Courage, because I think particularly when we talk about AI and the oh my God, so much AI generated content, particularly on LinkedIn, you're like, oh my God, this is like the same infographic with the same thing. And then and you're just like, I'm drowning in this garbage. And so leaning into being courageous, leaning into being human, right? going to be funny when a day arrives. So it's like generated by a human, right? This was generated by a human. Like that story, people want to feel it and hear it. And I think that's really important.
Well, I'm going to process all of this, uh, taking that measured
Yeah.
input and feedback and think about it. I'll probably dump the transcript into an LLM to give me like 13 tips for how to be a better manager, but that's kind of what the book is. So I encourage everyone to read it. But here's what I'm going to do now and flip the script a little bit. We do our lightning round, which is deliberately intended to make you think as quickly as possible and maybe not as accurately as possible, but your gut instinct may be the right one. And I promise if you say anything offensive, we can think about deleting it and talk about that afterwards.
No right or wrong. All right, here we go. I'm getting ready.
I mean, people always say there's no right or wrong. Sometimes there's wrong. I mean, I'm not going to say there's no wrong. It depends on what your answer is. But so I wrote a couple of these down, and the others I'm probably thinking about just based on things you said, but some from the book, right? So what either scares you or kind of gives you pause more, bad bosses or ones that are actually like disengaged?
Disengaged.
Like don't care, not actively engaging in any way.
When you start that downward spiral, when you don't start to not give a shit, it's hard to come out from that. Where some bad bosses, there's a spectrum. Right. You can still find your way out of that.
So, okay, the other one is micromanager versus ghost manager.
Oh my God. That's a really good one. I think it's, I'm going to say micromanager because I hate being micromanaged and I'm a micromanager. I could make a case for either, but there's nothing like micromanaging to like kill the joy at work for me. It's like you hired me to do a job. Let me do my job. Don't do my job for me.
Yeah, it makes you think, is it more about me or you?
Yeah, and when you're, the plus side of a ghost manager, I've had a few of those. You get to do their job for them. And then you get to put that all on your resume if I'm going to have a positive spin on some of these things.
Well, you just don't know when they're going to show up, right? That's part of the challenge. Is like you almost live with that anxiety. Whereas at least with for me, if a micromanager, I know how to manage a micromanager. That's just me. But okay, this may vary depending on who you are, what you do. But what is like the last time of day that you can send an email, or like how early should you then start thinking about scheduling your email to be sent?
Oh my gosh, see, this is tough. I mean, but this goes back to communication framework for me. Probably not past like 7.
Okay. Yeah, it depends if they have family or commuting.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, on a Friday, you're sending a note at 9 p.m. Like now it goes into the days of the week. You're like, why are you doing that? No one's reading what is happening? Yeah. What is happening?
Okay. In all the words in the English language, what is one word? Pick one that defines great leadership.
I'm going to go back to what we said, which is self-awareness. If people were more self-aware and that was the foundation of how we operated, I think a lot of the problems we see in the workplace would be mitigated.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to then be self-aware or maybe previously aware, something you can look back on. You've had the benefit of time on this one, but what was, because I don't think you manage anyone now, but what was your worst management or leadership habit?
Micromanaging.
Oh, really?
Down. Micromanaging Mita, which is ironic because I hate to be micromanaged, but I've thought about this a lot. And I think where I really went wrong was that I demanded excellence, but I didn't coach excellence. So I demanded people, like I wanted people to be at the standard that I never really coached or taught them to be. And it goes back to the moment of, hey, you're a manager now and you have 10 people to oversee, and how you continue to climb the ladder without support or without being able to say, I actually don't know how to lead other people. No one's actually taught me how to do that.
That's a really smart way to frame it. And I have to think about how I use that to give advice to others without making them feel defensive. So,
yeah, that's tough.
Okay. So now I've been a podcast guest before. People ask me like, what's the best advice you ever received? I'm like, I don't know. There's so much and so little at the same time. I want to ask you the opposite question. What is the best career advice you ignored?
Best career advice I ignored. I was so obsessed with working for like big, sexy brands. I always wanted to go to the brand that had the most money, the most budget, and was in the limelight. And I ended up falling into this advice, not by choice, but people would say, mentors would say, go and work for I hate the language, dog brands. Go and work for the underperforming brands. Go and do that. Help turn it around, lead that business, and then watch when you leave the line out the door to take your role when you're ready to move on. And it's true in some of those brands, and I learned this the hard way, that are under the radar that nobody cares about at these big companies, you can do much more with.
Sure.
Because they're not cooks in the kitchen. They have no expectation. They're like, we're either going to sell this off. We know this is the situation with this brand. And so that's what I would hope more people do, is like, don't go for the sexy title, the big brand name. Go and really think about, what are you going to learn in this assignment? And I wish I had done that more often.
Is that, well, so what?
And I've done both, to be clear, but yeah.
So then what are you next fixated on, focused on, writing about? What is next for Mita?
I have a third book
I'm
working on, and I will just leave it at, it's going to be a sequel to The Devil Emails at Midnight. And what kind of sequel, I won't reveal yet, but I am very fascinated still on like how people are behaving at work. That is like, companies are not companies. Companies are made up of individuals who are flawed. And so if we go back to, if people could be more self-aware and think of their interactions, like how much better could companies perform? I'm really interested in that correlation.
Okay, well, I'm sure there's no shortage of content given
I don't think so.
I mean, there are millions of workplaces, there are millions of relationships, but there are common threads, both good and those that provide areas for improvement. Hopefully we bend towards the progress in that way. But, sometimes we revert back to who we are, and we got to be aware of that.
Yeah.
So, well, I am aware of the time on the clock and how much time that you have given to this conversation. So thank you, Mita. I really do appreciate, this is a different kind of wisdom and knowledge than we usually get in these conversations, because you're like a reformed marketer. It's taking this.
I don't know about that, but yes,
graduated.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah. Oh, it is. You escaped from the swamps of to evolve. But seriously, thank you, and please do come back.
I will
for the next book.
I appreciate
it. I love having authors on because it forces me to actually buy a real book
and read it.
With like it was like a book report. Like I have a deadline I have to understand everything by. So
thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And good luck with the writing process. I'm jealous. It's the one thing I've wanted to do that I've never been able to do. So maybe your fourth book can be coaching people on how to act.
I love that idea. There it is.
We'll talk about that offline.
All right. Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Snarketing Podcast. Huge thanks to Mita Mallick for reminding us that inclusion drives business and that leadership is shaped in the small moments, even the midnight ones. Lead better. Email smarter. And sending our love to Valerie and looking forward to seeing you next time.